Good evening, fans out there like music and stories. I'm actually, this is Patrick Michael Kernahan. I'm in my art studio where I paint a lot of my oil paintings. You can see behind me I have my wildland firefighting artwork, which I've been doing for decades. And tonight's podcast, number 8, is going to be based on a story, true story took place on August 5th, 1949. Just south of Helena, Montana, a place called Gates of the Mountain, the 1949 tragic Man Gulch fire. I basically heard of the story when I took wildland firefighting Basic 32. This is back in the 1970s, late 70s, on the Plumas National Forest. Basic 32 fire schools, you basically learn how to be a wildland firefighter, a grunt, basic get out there and work in a 20-person crew, or later on fire engines, and some go to hot shots and everything else. I worked on hand crews and fire engines. Never served on a hot shot crew, except as replacement when somebody was not there. So, and I've never been a smoke jumper, but I do know a little bit about smoke jumping. I've been around a lot of smoke jumpers on fires and heard their stories. And this story primarily deals with smoke jumpers. 1949, Missoula, which is quite a ways from where the fire took place. They had a crew that day with a new foreman, fairly new, named Wagner Dodge. And they got a call, radio, that we had a fire that broke out above the Missouri River, Gates of the Mountain. So we assembled the crew. They went up in the, I think, C-47, went up there and they jumped the fire. And they thought the fire would be a routine fire, even taking time to have some food, say, hey, we'll get some food down and then we'll kind of work at it. Now, the fire was below where the firefighters actually landed in their jump zone. And that was a problem because they were upslope from the fire. The wind started developing in the afternoon. And what ended up being a routine mop-up mission ended up being a tragic fire that took the lives of 13 wildland firefighters. And I wrote this song based on that story, and the research I read about it when I was a firefighter in the beginning, back in the late 70s. Then later on, about 1995, I think 96 is when I wrote the song. The band was on tour. We were going from, let's see, somewhere down, I think we went from Red Lodge all the way up to Helena. We were going to play there at the Myrtle Lloyd Center, I believe. And we went through that particular area, and I remember about the Man Gulch fire. I could look up there, and I said, that's where those firefighters died. And I remember back from the 70s at fire school. So I felt really strong about writing this song down, which I did. And this is based on the history account of the fire. There was also another song that was written by a very talented Canadian composer, James Keelan, called Cold Missouri Waters, which takes the story to a different place. Mine's based more on the historical, what I learned from fire school. And we'll have a little epilogue after this where I'll go a little bit about Cold Missouri Waters, because the Black Irish Band actually performs that song too. Now this song is key of F, not a great guitar key, but as Michael Martin Murphy told me, he said, son, make sure you write your songs in the key that best maybe suits your voice, okay? I did sing the song on the original recording, and I wrote this back in 1995-96. First appeared on the album, I think, Hooligans United. Now it's on our Wildland Firefighting album. Cold Missouri Waters, to the men of that day. Here was 1949. On a warm Missoula day, when 13 brave young jumpers and their youth they'd have to pay. Mold and clear and sunny, afternoon the sky turned gray, till lightning torch the timber, how it burned those hills away. It was just a routine mission, and it spread over the ground, taking time for supper, how the crew they gathered round. Further in the gulch, though, how the fiery winds did blow. Further in the gulch, how the fiery embers glow. In the line of duty they'd struggle to be free. In their youthful courage now in time they all will be. Now working in the gulch as they try to dig a line, and the fire rages towards them, dropping tools there isn't time. Racing for ridge top as they try to stay ahead, but if mistakes are made now then the crew will all be dead. It was in the time of panic how communications fell. In the smoky darkness how the crew they couldn't tell. Minutes take a lifetime as that fire rages near. 13 brave young jumpers and the ghosts disappear. And they're gone off in the fire underneath Montana skies, with their packs so light and heavy where the smoke burns their eyes. In the line of duty they'd struggle to be free. In their youthful courage now in time they all will be. Well, many years though later from that warm buzz of the day, 13 lonely crosses mark the hill so far away. In their faithful duty to the force they tried to escape. In their faithful duty now in time they all will stay. They have gone off in the fire underneath Montana skies, with their packs so laden heavy where the smoke burns their eyes. In the line of duty they'd struggle to be free. In their youthful courage now in time they all will be. Now in time they all will be. Now in time they'll always be. I wrote that in dedication to the 13 smoke jumpers that died in 1949 on this day, August 5th. Some would argue, well, one of them was not a smoke jumper at the time. He was actually a forest guard, but he had been a smoke jumper. He was a forest guide from a station down below, I think Meriwether Station. He came up to help check out the fire, and his mother didn't want him doing dangerous work like smoke jumping, so he became a forest guard. But he also died tragically in the fire. I did mention that there was another story that was written about this fire more recently. In fact, I heard this song probably a couple years after I had written Underneath Montana Skies, written by a very talented man, James Keelian from Canada, and I love his work. He's a very good singer-songwriter, won a lot of Juno Awards. And he based his story, I believe, on the book Young Men in Fire, which is written by Norman McLean, who wrote the story based more on Wagner Dodge and what he faced. Wag Dodge was the foreman of the crew that day. Wag Dodge was a new supervisor to the jump crew, and he wasn't really well known by the crew, so they didn't have a lot of faith in him. They didn't have that camaraderie that you develop over the years working with a crew, and he was new. So when they jumped the fire, they took some time to have a little bit of lunch, and then they realized the fire was blowing up. And as the fire raced up toward them, with that updraft wind, it basically became a race for survival. Only the strongest runners survived, which were two at the top of the ridge. They were able to duck into some rocks as the fire passed over. The others weren't so lucky. Now here's where the controversy has to do with Wagner Dodge, and there was an investigation. He was crew foreman, I believe, that day, and he told the crew basically, as they were racing up the hill, he had heard, I guess, from Native American strategy when it came to wildfires that if you light a backfire, it will burn into the updrafting wind that's coming up It'll suck the flames from that little fire you light into the main, and you burn out the fuels in front of you as it goes into the main force of the fire coming at you. So the idea is to burn that area, be in the black, a safety area, and then the fire will burn around you, and there won't be fuels to consume you. Now, remind you, this was before there were fire shelters. The fire shelter wasn't developed till 1978. In fact, when I started out with the Forest Service, we had the first line of fire shelters. We called them shake and bake bags, or turkey cookers. So anyways, this is before they had that. So this was just something that slid in his brain to light that little fire there. And he was yelling to the crew as they're running by him, said, stay in the fire, and he'll come back, come back. At least that's the way he explained it in the investigation. Of course, they didn't have faith with Wag Dodge, and they just bypassed him. They kept running by him. And he goes, why don't you, mind you, this happens in a split second. There's not a lot of time here. That fire is racing up like a freight train. Loud, intense heat. For whatever reason, they didn't listen, and they ran up the hill, and they all perished, except for the 2 runners at the top, who were just happened to be young that day, and had the youth to get up there where the others didn't. They dropped their tools. And as you can hear that in the song, talks about the communication and the smoky darkness. So that's basically James Keelahan's version is written about Wagner Dodge and about how he's in a hospital bed, because he did die, I believe just recently after that, of cancer. I think he had Hodgkin's. And he was in a hospital bed, and the idea he's telling the story from his deathbed about what really happened the day. That he tried to get them to come to a safety fire, escape fire, but they wouldn't do it. They ignored him. So that was what he based his song on, and I based mine on what I learned in Wildland Firefighter 32, which is just based on the facts that we knew at the time. So anyways, that originally appeared on the Black Irish Band album, Hooligans United, which came out in 1996. And it's also now currently on our Wildland Firefighting album songs. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast number 8. It was dedicated to the 13 firefighters on the Man Gulch Fire. So here from my art studio in Humboldt County, where I do my wildland firefighting art. By the way, I am a retired firefighter. I'm no longer doing that. Getting too old for that. That's for younger people. And so I hope you enjoyed this podcast. There'll be much more coming. And so thank you for listening and staying tuned. I hope you enjoyed the information about that fire and learned a little bit about that, what happened. And if you get a chance, read Norman McLean's book, Young Men and Fire. Also, his son, John McLean, has written some fantastic books on a lot of these subjects that I find interesting, and you might too. So we'll see you down the road. We'll see you next time. Be good, be safe, and be fire safe. And remember, Smokey Bear says, only you can prevent forest fires.